No, so today I want to talk about this idea of managing your emotions, and credit to Tracy. We were coming up with the title for this one, and I said overcoming your emotions. She's like, what about managing? Because do you really overcome your emotions? Which is a great point because you don't overcome them. Most things in life you don't necessarily overcome; you just manage. You just find your way through it, find your way around it. To keep moving forward. And emotions are the same way. And emotions can completely destroy our mindset. And I want to introduce this idea from fellow giant, good friend, Dr. Jessica Rimmer. I'm going to get her on the Monday Mindset here soon to go deeper into this idea because she's working on this concept that I'm trying to help her work out into a book, maybe into a course, maybe into a number of things because I just think it's really, really good. On she's calling it kind of emotional integration, but learning to manage your emotions to keep moving forward. Because for most of life, we've been taught from a leadership perspective and a work perspective, like no emotions, right? Almost this like stoicism thing of like, just do the work. Your emotions don't matter. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. Show up, do the work. It's just the job, right? The job is the job. Just do it. Don't ask questions. And that's kind of how we've operated. And there's some good to that, right? That to a degree allows you to keep moving forward, to keep making progress, to battle through difficult moments. There's obviously some bad that comes from that, right? Ignoring your emotions is not healthy, right? Suppressing your emotions is not a healthy thing. So there's some harm that has been done from that style of operating in a leadership sense, but also just for us as individuals. If you think through the giant lens of support and challenge, most of life has been all from the challenge perspective. We've just led and expected people to operate out of a sense of challenge without the support piece. Well, so now we're switching all the way over to your emotions. They're true and they matter and they're real, and you need to know them and live out of them and honor them and all these things about your emotional side. So it's switching from kind of the stoicism, no emotion, all challenge, over here to hyper emotional, to high support, uh, and there's some good from that, right? People are recognizing their emotions, they're understanding that emotions exist. There's some negative that goes along with that positive, right? With anything, there's good and bad. And so the positive piece is that we're acknowledging emotions. We're not ignoring or suppressing emotions. But the negative is that we're allowing those emotions to be considered true when oftentimes they're not. And when you're living just out of emotion, when you're letting your emotions control you, that becomes overwhelming, right? This other side is overpowering. This side is overwhelming, which I think is partially why there's this constant sense of anxiety, of depression, of worry, of doubt, some of these mental struggles. And I'm not talking about like clinical anxiety or clinical depression, right? There's a barrier here. There's levels to this stuff. So I'm talking about just kind of a general, people are anxious, people are worried, people are negative, people are operating in a sense of unhealth. When if you look at most measures of human flourishing, and again, don't hear what I'm not saying everything in the world is awesome. Obviously it's not. There are some things that need to improve, some things that need to get better, some things that need attention and effort, and to be fixed, and things that need to be gone and gotten rid of. But access to wealth is higher than it's ever been. Access to food and water, access to education, all the life expectancy, all these things that we would consider measurements of human flourishing are higher and greater than they've ever been. Yet people are more anxious and worried and negative and depressed and doubtful and cynical than they've ever been. And that's a mental issue. It's not again, not talking about clinical anxiety, clinical depression, talking about just a sense of constant worry that things aren't okay, and we're always offended by things and we're always angered by things. And it's living out of these emotions becomes a burden on people, on everyone, on the person living out of those emotions and on the people around them. And so, one of the things that Jessica talks about is like we need both sides, right? You need to like you have emotions, but you are not your emotions. And that's a really critical thing for us to understand, right? You have emotions, but you are not your emotions. You get to have a choice in how you show up, because emotions are oftentimes lying to us. Emotions are oftentimes bringing out some of the worst qualities and characteristics of us. Our fears are unnecessary, our unfounded fears and worries are coming out. And if we don't recognize them for what they are, we live out of them, which becomes a problem, again, for us and for those around us. If we live out of our emotions all the time, we become overwhelmed. And so there's this idea of you have emotions, but you've got to come back to this side, some of the logical, some of the factual, some of the stoic thing to navigate through those emotions, to say, where do I actually need to be? Because maybe that emotion is true and I need to live out of it by choice, right? Not by default, but by design. Or it's being able to battle through and say, no, that emotion's actually not true. That emotion is a lie and it's not true. It's not helpful. So I recognize it. I can see where it's coming from, but I'm going to navigate back to this middle ground so that I can move forward on purpose, because I don't need to let that emotion drive me. I don't need to let that emotion take me out. So to give you maybe a real world example, to bring this to real basic, let's say your boss does something that you don't agree with, makes a decision that you don't agree with, makes a decision that you would not have made. Well, what tends to happen right now, and a lot of teams that I deal with, is we say, "Well, I don't trust them anymore." It's like, well, that's a heavy thing to lay on someone, that you don't trust them anymore. That's an emotion, right? I no longer trust them. Well, why? Well, because they made the decision that I wouldn't have made. They didn't pick my idea. They didn't choose me for the promotion, whatever it may be. They didn't make the decision that you wanted them to make. Great, that's okay, right? Leaders will constantly make decisions that we don't agree with. That's part of life. But that doesn't mean you don't trust them. That just means you disagreed with them in the moment. Now, and I'm taking out moral things, right? If it's a moral issue, totally different topic. But if it's just a strategic decision or a hiring decision, like they just did something you didn't agree with that you wouldn't have done, and that is okay. But you've got to recognize that when you say you don't trust them, and to live out of that emotion is now going to put a wall between the two of you, because you're going to, every interaction with them, you've got this wall up, like, I don't trust them anymore. They've done nothing to lose your trust, but you're living out of that unhealthy emotion, that false emotion, that this person is now not trustworthy. So now there's a wall there, which is going to create bitterness, is going to create disconnect, it's going to create frustration, all because you're living out of an emotion that's not true. We have to be able to self-regulate and say, I don't, it's fine to have that thought, right? So it's not wrong to have unhealthy emotions like this. This is all of us. So this is, like, I have unhealthy, false, wrong, lying emotions all the time. But the key is to recognize them. So wait a minute. No, I do trust them. I've got to battle that emotion with the truth. Say, no, I do trust them. They've shown in my life over and over and over again that I can trust them. So I'm going to ignore that emotion, realize that's my own insecurity coming out, and choose, like, no, I trust them. I trust them. I'm going to continue to follow them. I'm going to continue to show up. Or maybe when someone holds you accountable for something, that's never fun. And usually what happens, if you're like me, hopefully you're not, is I get defensive and now I want to take that person out. Well, who are you? I want to destroy their credibility. Like, you don't know who I am. You don't have the right to hold me accountable. You don't have the right to question me. Why are you always against me? Well, this person's always shown themselves to be for me. But that emotion of not liking being challenged or being held accountable is causing my insecurity to rise up. Well, leading out of that emotion is going to fracture that relationship, and I'm going to lose my influence. But to have the self-awareness, to have the self-regulation, right? To allow people to always live out of their emotions, to always validate somebody's emotions and empower somebody's emotions, what you're ultimately doing is preventing them from learning how to self-regulate. And to get back to the middle ground of saying, I have this emotion, but it's not true, it's not right, it's not helpful. I need to get back to this place, to the middle ground, so that I can move forward. Again, it's not living over here of ignoring the emotions, suppressing them. It's just saying, I know that I have emotions, but I get to choose how I show up. And this is all a mindset thing, right? Your emotions are a mindset thing. You will be taken out by your emotions if you don't learn how to regulate them, if you don't learn how to manage them, if you don't learn how to lead yourself through them. You will be owned by your emotions, which will cause you to constantly make the wrong decision, to say things that you wouldn't normally say, to do things that you wouldn't normally do, which is just going to create more bitterness, more frustration, more disconnect. All because you're trying to validate your emotions. Well, this is how I feel, so it must be true. Sometimes, right? Sometimes the emotions are true. Oftentimes they're not. And so to have the mental strength, the mental stability, the mental grit to recognize those emotions for what they are, to categorize them correctly, to understand where they're coming from, but to navigate your way back to the middle, say, no, this is where I am. I'm going to live out my values. I'm going to live out my purpose. I'm going to live out my standard. I'm not going to live out my emotions. Right? My emotions don't get to dictate who I am or what I'm about. They don't get to decide whether or not I have a good day or a bad day. Right? Maybe you just had a hard day. Your emotions will tell you it's a bad day. And then that's going to snowball into other things. Logic and truth will tell you, no, it wasn't a bad day. It was just a hard day. It's a day that I can learn from, a day that I can grow from, a day that I can get better from, not a day that I need to escape from. And so we have to learn how to recognize and navigate through our emotions to get to truth, to get to this middle ground of living out our standard and our values and not our emotions. So again, this idea of emotional integration, and we'll talk through some of this more with Jessica when she has time to come on the Monday Mindset. But I wanted to get this idea kind of into your water system, so to speak. For you to be wrestling with this throughout the day, throughout the week, anytime an emotion pops up, it's saying, wait a minute, where's that emotion coming from? Is it true? Is that real? Right? Run it through your data system of logic and truthfulness. Say, okay, I see that emotion, but I'm going to live here. And it may be out of that emotion, but it's because you've made the choice to live out of that emotion, not doing it out of default. Right? We need to live our design, not our default, because our default is often going to undermine us. So understand your emotions. They're real. They are there. You don't need to ignore them, but you don't need to give them more power than they actually deserve. Understand them for what they are. Understand that you have emotions, but you are not your emotions. Use your self-awareness, use your mindset, use the truth to get back to a middle ground so that you can move forward on purpose. Tracy, any thoughts on that?
It's hard for me because I tend toward, I think if we had a graphic and we showed this is highly emotional person right here, and this is emotions are completely cut off, everyone could kind of pinpoint where they're at, I think. And I would be lower on I would be, let's just do away with emotions altogether. And that's not healthy.
Yeah.
And so I guess a lot of questions here, but how do you determine where you are, or can you even see that completely in yourself? Do you have to have an outsider kind of show you where you would be on that graph?
Well, that's a great question, because part of me thinks just do 5 voices. For those who know that system, right? Probably guardians and pioneers are going to be lower on the emotions matter scale, for lack of better. It doesn't mean they don't have emotions. They just don't generally express them. They're not generally as good, not always, but not generally as good at dealing with other people's emotions. They're like, why are you up? This is just the truth. Why are you upset about it? Like, it's just made a decision. Why are you mad about? Why are you hurt by it? The facts are the facts. My facts don't care about your feelings. So that tends to come from the guardians and the pioneers, some of the creative pioneers, whereas the nurturers and the connectors are the other side, where everything can be emotional. And what you're going to wear today is going to go through an emotional filter. Every word someone says to you before it gets to your brain is going through your heart, right? It's going through these emotional filters. So I think the 5 voices can help on some level, but some of it, even just the nurture, not nurturer, but the nurture of our surround, how we've been raised, the environment that you're in. Some environments are just very emotionally driven. Some are not. So we can be a product of our environments, but I think it's a good exercise to consider where you are. And the question we always ask, right? Well, based on how you function from an emotional perspective, right? Whether you tend to ignore them or you tend to give them too much power. Well, how's that working out for you? And based on that, what's it like to be on the other side of you? What kind of experience are you creating for yourself? And what kind of experience are you creating for other people?
Yeah. So if we take that into the workplace, I don't know where it came from. I don't know if it was an instilling from my parents, which would be nurture. But I mean, I always had the mindset of the workplace is no place for emotions. Just leave those out of there. And yet there is emotion that comes up in meetings. And when you're passionate about things, when you're working on something creative that you have invested in, it is emotional. And so how do people how do people practically regulate that? If they're highly emotional, how do they bring it down a notch?
Yep.
If you even think they need to. If you're not emotional at all, how do you raise that, hey, I'm actually excited about something? No one can tell because I don't show it, but there's both ends of the spectrum, right?
Yeah. It's like, Tracy, are you excited? Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah, I can.
Can't you tell?
Are you? Can't you tell? What do you mean? I think it's a great idea. No, I think it's good, right? And so it's I think there are issues with both sides, right? Both
Yeah.
sides can tend to have more negative outcomes than positive outcomes. I think if you're overly emotional, preparing to go into a situation where you could be critiqued, where you could be shut down, right? You could bring up an idea in a meeting and they not take it, or they reject it. Where you're presenting a project you've worked on, or a campaign that you've worked on, whatever it may be, preparing yourself for them to not like it. And say, like, hey, they like, don't walk in expecting them to be like, this is amazing, this is the best thing I've ever seen, because you think it's great because you put your heart and soul into it, which is okay. Um, but you don't have to get emotional about their response to it, right? They didn't put the work into it. They don't care about it the way that you care about it. Um, and to say for you to get emotional about it, is that gonna help?
Mm.
No, doesn't mean you shouldn't care about it. I think caring is great, right? I think caring is a competitive advantage. But if you're somebody that's constantly emotional, what I would say is that I can't trust you in hard situations. I'm like, this
Mm.
person, you are going. This is a perception. The perception is that you are unstable. That doesn't mean that's true, but that's going to be the perception. Like, man, we can't give any feedback to this person because they shut down every time we have some critique. Like they start crying, they lose it, they get angry, they get, okay, well, I guess we'll just not talk to that person because the person across me doesn't want to deal with that drama.
Mhm.
So that doesn't mean you go emotionless. It's like, but find the middle ground. If you're the other side, right, where the emotions kind of aren't there, that can appear the same way. It's going to be like, this person doesn't care at all. Like, we gave them some critique, some feedback, and it was like they weren't even in the room,
Mm.
like that. But again, that's why I say both sides have negatives to them. So if you tend to be emotionless, it's like, smile, work on smiling, work on body language matters. Doesn't mean that you have to come in and be loud, that you need to be high-fiving, you need to be celebrating, you need to be crying. It's like, just think about the body language, right? If you're in a meeting sitting like this,
Mhm.
that tells people that you don't care. You're like, no, I was just comfortable. I know you were comfortable, but it's what that's telling people, right? Again, it's our job is as leader, as humans, is to own the experience that we create for people. And it's not to, you know, find your validation in how other people like see you and think about you, but you do have to care about how other people see you and think about you. Like, it does matter. It's not for validation, it's for effectiveness, it's for
Mhm.
influence. And so if they think that you don't care, you say, well, that's their fault. That, I care plenty. Well, show that you care,
Mm.
right? Show that you are invested a little bit. Again, you don't have to swing all the way over to here, but come find that middle ground of like, what is healthy emotion? What does a healthy expression of emotion look like? And that's the real piece, right? So again, not suppressing emotions, not living out of them. It's finding a healthy expression of them.
Mhm. Yeah, to Anthony's point here, that he thinks emotion can be a positive when it drives your passion of doing your work well. I agree. He also said, let's see, in many organizations, you're expected to leave your emotions at the door. These employers don't understand the value of the holistic person. And we're finally seeing the response in the great resignation
Hmm.
and the desire
Hmm.
for flexible work. That's so true. People are going
Absolutely.
to keep going. They're going to move along if they don't feel like they're validated.
That's right.
Yeah.
If you're treated as just a number, you will not be there very long. And so for those who treat people as numbers, the cost for you, to hire and keep people, those numbers are going to keep going up, right? Because it's
Mhm.
it's very expensive to treat people as numbers. You will have high turnover. You will have, um, just all sorts of issues that you don't want to deal with because you don't treat people as people. On the flip side, if you go the opposite way and realize, like, hey, there is work to be done. Like, there
Mhm.
are expectations. So like, you're not going to love what you do every day. We've talked about before, like, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. No, work is work. And you got to be passionate about your work. I don't know. Like, my mom is a legal secretary. I don't know that she's passionate about it. Right. It's like, she's done it for 40 years and she just won employee of the year after, working at the same law firm for, I don't know, 25 years. I don't know that she's passionate about it. She's like, I'm just going to go do the work. Like, I'm good at it. They take care. They treat her like a person. There are employee level, company type expectations of production and effort and attitude and how often you show up. But we've got to find that balance. And again, we've just lived way too far over here on the, you're a number, leave your emotions at the
Mhm.
door. We can't come fully over here because we'll never get anything done because people are going to be overwhelmed by it. We're living out our emotions, good or bad. You're positive if things are going well, you're negative and losing it if things are going poorly. Well, find the middle ground, and I think it was Anthony was his name. Your emotions can be a positive if they're driving a passion for your work. Absolutely. Right. And sometimes you have to, like, especially if you're in the startup world, or if you're running your own thing, or maybe just in a difficult season, you've got to, like, drum up that passion, to go to work on difficult days. And that's part of it. That can serve you well in down seasons. But it's always realizing, how are those playing out in my life? How are my emotions causing me to think? How are they causing me to speak? How are they causing me to act? And what is that doing to my influence? Like, this person is now getting distant from you. Well, know yourself to lead yourself. Oh, you were critiqued in a meeting. Your tendency is to get negative and then lash out at that person because you're leading out of a wrong emotion. Well, now they're getting distant because they don't want to deal with you, being emotional. Okay, I need to learn how to take critique. Or again, I'm sitting there emotionless and they think, oh, he doesn't care, I guess I won't talk to him. And that person doesn't talk to you anymore. Like, well, I just didn't think you care. Every time I come in, it just feels like you don't have a response. And you're like, oh, I'm usually just thinking and processing what you're saying. If I was against it, if I didn't care, I wouldn't still be here. Like, the evidence of me caring is that I'm here doing the work and engaging. So we just always have to be thinking from both perspectives. How do we find that healthy expression of our emotions?
That's good. Toby makes a good point. Never heard it kind of put this way. I've always looked at emotions as that person's language, and it's a language I need to learn to work with and build a great team. I've often found myself speaking multiple languages in a meeting. That's a good leader right there, as someone who's really in tune with every person on the team.
That's right. Yeah. And what I love about that is, Toby, you're taking the time to consider each person, to realize each person is different and their emotions are going to be different. Their personality is going to be different. And so instead of saying, well, they have to adapt to me as the leader, which is true, right? That is true. You're saying, I'm going to go first and adapt to them, which then makes them want to adapt to you. Because we have to adapt to the emotions, again, not to over validate emotions, but to understand how people on your team operate. As a leader, you need to know that. You cannot ignore that, because you may need to help them navigate through that doubt or that worry or that mistrust or that anxiety that's actually a lie. And if you just drop a bomb on them and leave, so if you know someone, glad Toby said this. So if you know someone on your team that tends to get overly emotional, who shuts down at being critiqued or whatever it may be, and you're going to go in and give them some potentially negative feedback, you cannot just go in and drop that bomb on them and leave. Like, you have to know them well enough to say, hey, I know where your mind's going to go with this. I know you're going to start getting worried. Like, do they actually value me? You're great. All that, none of that's true. I'm just talking about this specific task or this specific instance. That's it. I think you're great. Like, if these other things were true, we'd be having conversations about them. Just having a conversation about this one thing. So don't let your mind wander. I know it does, and that's okay. But this is what we're talking about. You're valued incredibly. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. But to know how people operate so that you can help lead them through. Because one, that's, again, showing them that you see them as more than an employee, as more than a number on a spreadsheet. You see them as a person. You understand they may at times operate in an unhealthy way. And instead of criticizing them or calling them out for it, you're calling them up and leading them through it, which is what great leaders do, right? You understand the emotions of your people so you can help lead them through it, which gives them the tools and the power to ultimately learn to lead themselves through it. So I think it's a great example, Toby. Well done.
Yeah. Kind of ending with this question, Margaret saying, in working with a highly emotional client or person, how would you handle the heightened emotions so that they can hear what you have to share?
It may be, hey, let's have this conversation later. We tend to think conversations need to happen in that moment, and sometimes they do. Sometimes there is an urgency. Other times, like, hey, I can see like you're getting emotional with this. I don't want to add to that. So let's have this conversation later, maybe in an hour, maybe tomorrow, let's sleep on it, whatever it may be. One option. Another, just sitting, hey, let's talk. Like, what are you thinking right now? What are you feeling? Walk me through where you're at, to allow them to get that emotion out, and talk through it so that it doesn't always have to just live in their own head. Say, hey, I can see you're getting emotional. I'm not, like, it's okay. Let's walk through it. We can talk about this thing in a minute. Let's walk through these emotions. Like, tell me where you're at. Tell me what you're thinking. I'll help you like navigate through that to get to truth. to get to that middle ground so we can have a healthy conversation. But that again takes you knowing that person well enough for you to be able to help them battle those emotions with truth. Oh, you're thinking this. Yeah, that's not true, Jeff. Like, this is how I feel about you. Like, we've had this conversation all the time. Again, not in a shaming way, just reminding them like, hey, no. Like, I'm for you. I care about you. I trust you. Like, if I didn't trust you, I wouldn't be here. So don't let that thought take root in your mind. So being able to actually navigate through that with people, most leaders, and I know I'm generalizing, most leaders won't do that. They think that's a burden on them. They think people shouldn't have emotions, whatever. It's like, no, people are going to have them. Our job is to help navigate through them.
Yeah. And you touched on it about, needing to know your people, but I'll just use an example of my own. I have a one-on-one meeting every week with Bronson, our CEO. He's who I report directly to. And the first question he asked me when we got on the call is, how are you? How are you? Not just work. He'll go, anything. Let's talk about anything personal, your family, something stressful going on in your life, a work thing, but I want to know how you are. And he sets the conversation up so that I know he's for me, that he actually cares, because that sets up my emotional state, right? It's like, well, I had an issue with my whoever in my family. And now, and you can get a temperature on that person to say, oh, they're going through some things right now. They may be heightened emotionally right now. And you can assess that and have some compassion and empathy for that person before you ever start a conversation. And I really appreciate that about Bronson.
Because he could be laying anything on you and not knowing the stress that he just added that you were already dealing with. He just didn't know. So I think that's really good. To give a sort of an example, I was with a team recently, a basketball team, and their coach was telling me how she had operated in practice. They're running a play, and it's kind of an end of game type deal where they're trying to get the last shot. And they have this girl who's a really good shooter, and she said, all right, this is your shot. This is coming to you. Like, be ready for it. And the girl airballed like a couple of them, was not coming close. And this girl's a really good shooter. And the coach is like, what in the world? Well, then she remembered her personality. She's like, the pressure. Under pressure, her emotions, right? The nerves take over, the insecurity takes over, the doubt, the lack of confidence takes over, and she's not going to execute on that shot. So she switched it to another person. It's like, hey, this is actually on you to make the perfect pass. So it's not on the shooter now. It's on you to make the perfect pass so that she can get the right shot off. Make sure you make this pass quickly, make it correctly, set her up for success. Well, the person passing it's like, great, I can make this pass in my sleep. But that took the pressure, the emotional, the heightened emotional sense off the shooter. And all of a sudden when she switched, that she started making 4 or 5 in a row. And again, she understood she helped her manage her emotions by taking the pressure off of her. Now, she'll probably work on her outside of practice on how to lead herself in those moments, to not let the pressure get the best of her, because she's too good for that, right? She doesn't, that emotion is having a negative impact on her performance. But in the moment, saying, you know what, I recognize what this is doing. I'm gonna switch. So again, that's knowing your people well enough. Don't add unnecessary burden to them. If you know something's going to add stress or is going to put unnecessary pressure on them, figure out a way around that. Care about your people enough to not add unnecessary stress.
Yeah, I love that. That's very wise. Well, we're about out of time. I said at the beginning that I'd put my email up here so that if anybody needed to reach out to us, there it is. Or if you want to hear more about Kevin and what he does, or get your team in a healthy state using Kevin, we'd love that. So, well, we'll see you next time. I look forward to having Jessica Rimmer on very soon. And you guys have a great week. We'll see you next Monday at the same time.
See you guys.